What is up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com, or, of course, if you are watching on our YouTube channel as well, that's Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner. Joining me, as he always does, for another THI podcast, is THI publisher Andrew Jones. And AJ, we're here to talk about a pretty interesting topic today. We're going to be, I guess, not really having a debate, but just having an organic discussion about, in our opinions, what is the most important piece for the Tar Heels to bring in to next season and for next season's team and roster. So we're going to dive into that in just a second. But AJ, before we do that, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor on this podcast. They've been hanging out with us for a while. It's myperfectfranchise.net. Guys, if you're sick of your job, you're looking to leave the corporate world, or maybe you're just looking to have a little bit of a side hustle, give Andy Ludicky a call. He's been a Rivals member for over 22 years, and he's just an all-around great guy. So, guys, you have absolutely nothing to lose. Give him a call. Check out his website, myperfectfranchise.net. See if starting a franchise is right for you, and he'll be able to help you out throughout the whole process. So, guys, links below. Check them out. Big shout out to Andy for continuing to sponsor our podcast. So, AJ, I think this is a really interesting discussion, a really interesting topic, because with the amount of guys that Carolina's lost in the transfer portal, they're obviously going to have to bring guys in and replacements in because they need bodies. And I'll kick it to you first, and then I'll offer my opinion on who the most important piece is. So in your opinion, AJ, when you're looking at this roster and looking how it can be reshaped, what is the most important piece or most important position do you think the Tar Heels need to fill to have a more successful season next year?
Well, to begin answering that, let's identify what the needs are, and we'll kind of go from there. Well, they've already got 1, 2/3. I still think that Paxton Wojcik might be more 3 in Hubert's eyes than a 2. He's looking at some 2s as well. Timberlake was in. They're looking at the kid from Northern Colorado, but they're going to look at a lot of other kids. So we're not going to name a bunch of names here because they're still, I wouldn't say they're in the infancy stage of diving into the portal, but the dead periods here now, guys can't visit. It's actually great for the staff because they get to pin their ears back, so to speak.
Kind of identify,
plunge into the portal and identify guys and more guys. You don't want to just take the first ones that are there. You got to be patient and see who else enters, because guys have until early May to enter into the portal. So, but you also want to get your team. I think it's really important that they have their 2023-24 roster intact by the time the first summer school session starts in May, so everybody could be on campus working, because they're going to have a lot of on-court chemistry stuff to get involved, to deal with, to go through, because they have a lot to work out. You want the new guys to get as immersed into the Carolina culture and basketball family as much as they can, and you want them to play against all the former pros when they come back, because that's more and more feeling like your Tar Heels. And let's face it, they have a brutally tough schedule next year. They play in the Jumpman Invitational. They're going to play either Oklahoma or Florida, which probably sounds like might be the easiest of their big non-conference games. They've got the CBS Sports Classic. They play Kentucky in that. They've got the Jimmy V Classic. It's to be determined, but there are going to be 4 schools in that. One of them's Carolina, one of them's UConn. And then they've got the tournament in the Bahamas, where they're going to play really, really good teams. And they also have the ACC SEC Challenge, where they're going to have somebody big in that league, because they'll be one of the top picks in the ACC. So I'm sure they'll play one of the upper tier SEC teams in that. So they've got to get ready. We talked to Mac Brown a couple of days ago, and he was talking about how, look, one of the reasons we're hitting a lot now in spring practice, we got to get ready to play, because out of the gate, they got South Carolina, then they got App State, then they got Minnesota, and they got to go to Pittsburgh in the first 4 weeks. They don't have time to grow into the season. Hubert's basketball team is not going to have time to grow into the season, because they're going to be playing a monster rolling on through. So they need to get these guys in by the 1st of May and get rolling. So to answer the question, the needs are, you need a shooting guard. You need a wing who could slash, bounce, hit threes. As we've said before, Roy's 3 national championship teams, the threes were Rashad McCants, Danny Green, and Justin Jackson. His couple other teams, like the 11 team and 12 teams that were close to being national title clubs, the 3 was Harrison Barnes. The last 1 seed Carolina had was 2019. The 3 was Cam Johnson.
Yeah,
you need a
huge.
big time 3.
It's huge, yeah.
Now, I think you also need a 4, but I don't think it's as glaring a need right now in a traditional standpoint. And I also think you need a backup 5, someone that could play behind Armando, would accept that role. And on the nights that Armando's in foul trouble or he tweaks an ankle, they can give you 20 minutes and then you could figure it out from there. So with that being said, Jacob, I think that they need a 3. I think they need a 3 that can slash, a 3 that can hit some threes, a 3 that will pound his chest, a 3 that will scream, a 3 that will get into the heads of the other team and give you value there as well as his production. And you need a guy who could cut back door and slam it. You need a guy who can get out in transition and fill lanes. You need a guy who is an uplifting player. He infuses the team with energy and deflates the opposition at the same time. Are there any guys out there like that right now? I think there's some. And if you fit it right, if you mesh it right, some of the guys that are out there might even be better fits. A lot of this is a fit deal.
Yeah.
So Paxson Wojcik, I think Hubert sees him as a 3, but I think he sees him as sort of a backup 3 too. I think that's ultimately how he fits in, depending on who he can get. So ideally, go out and get yourself a bouncy, springy, 3-point shooting, backdoor slashing, into the lane pull-up jumper shooting 3-man. Now, is that guy out there? I don't think they're out there in the form of Justin Jackson or Harrison Barnes.
No, that's tough to find guys like that.
Or Rashad McCants.
Danny
But
Green.
someone is out there that will complement having a fantastic 1 and a fantastic 5 already on the floor. That's my first one.
I like that, AJ. And I'm torn because I do agree with you in that respect. I think they definitely need a 3. You mentioned when you look at kind of the most successful teams in the last 20 years at North Carolina, especially the national championship winning teams, there was a 3 that was athletic and that can light it up. And that's so crucial to this program, the history of this program. But for the spirit of debate, AJ, I'll go against you. I'll say,
oh, nice.
I think Carolina needs a 4 more importantly. And I think a lot of Carolina fans, or I think I speak for a lot of Carolina fans in terms of their opinion with this one, because I know you remember last year, the theme on Twitter for a long time, especially when Carolina was struggling, Pete Nance was kind of the scapegoat because he never fit in terms of being a stretch 4. He was more comfortable as a 5, and that's where he wanted to be. That was more ideal for him and matched his skill sets a little bit more. So you saw a lot of people on social media on the boards during the season saying, we needed Brady Manek would just automatically fix this team. And I think that's a little bit easy to say. I think that's lazy because, as Hubert said many a times, every team is different. Each year is different. So you can't just say, well, if last year's team had Brady Manek, they would have won the national championship just because they made it to the final the last year. But when I look at what Hubert's trying to do and has been trying to do in his 2 seasons at Carolina, I think it's no coincidence that they were so successful during that run, and Brady Manek was one of the most important pieces on there because they had a guy as a stretch 4 that could spread the court. And also, AJ, I don't think it's a coincidence that we saw guys like Caleb Love struggle this year more because they didn't have a guy like Brady who you had to guard on the outside that could space the floor. Because we talked about at length how important Caleb and RJ are when the 4 is space and how much better they are when they have room to operate and get into the lane, to get buckets or just get other teammates involved by driving and kicking. So when I look at what Hubert's trying to do, I think he really needs a guy at the 4 position who not only can score, but is a legitimate threat and somebody you have to guard and be honest with as a defense from the outside. That to me is the most important piece for the Tar Heels coming in this year. Because I think when you look at the 3, I think the 2, I think that's super important. I think the 3 is super important as well. But having a stretch 4 there, I think is crucial to what Hubert and his staff is trying to do from an offensive standpoint. But that being said, will we see tweaks? Will we see adjustments? And maybe how Carolina plays next year is a little bit more based on who they can bring into the portal. Because AJ, like you said, it's hard to go find another guy like Brady Manek. I mean, Brady Manek was a perfect fit when you think about a guy that came from Oklahoma, had played big-time college basketball for 4 years in a really tough conference, and came over to North Carolina and really, after a while of kind of a bedding in process, really fit in and was crucial to the run they had. But those guys just aren't out there. It's hard to find those guys. And I think Brady was just kind of, in hindsight, was kind of a match made in heaven. It's going to be a little bit harder to do that again. So for the sake of argument, I'll say a stretch 4, but I definitely see your opinion with the 3. And I think that is almost equally as important too when you look at the successful teams in North Carolina history.
Well, a couple things. One of the things I've been pushing here the last couple of weeks is that you can slide your 3 down to the 4 spot and play 2 threes.
Yeah.
Because if you watch the tournament, that's kind of a lot of what's out there. I mean, imagine, if you will, Cam sliding down to the 4 for a while. Imagine Harrison Barnes in the modern day basketball sliding down to the 4. I mean, Harrison would be a 4 now, basically.
100% in today's basketball, yeah.
So that's, I think you've got to get production from the 3 spot. History is a clear indication that you've got to get it there. Because if you get it there and you have to guard the 3 and the shot, and a guy could put the ball on the floor and make some stuff happen, which all those guys could do. They were all willing passers. They could all make things happen. They could score from anywhere. That freezes a defense. And that tells that prevents a defense from cheating a lot. Carolina hasn't had that the last 4 years. Getting that would change things. Getting that means there was less pressure to find that 4. Because you know what? I think you could find a 3 that can do that easier than you could find a 4 to do what Brady Manick did for 4 weeks. And let's remember, Brady Manick was in the starting lineup and part of the deal when Duke came into the Dean Dome and blew him out.
Yeah, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows.
He was there when Pitt came into the Dean Dome and blew him out.
Good point.
He was there in Brooklyn when Virginia Tech blew him out in the ACC tournament. So it wasn't as if this was a 1 seed type team when Brady was on the floor. That wasn't the case. There were deficiencies. It didn't always work. And I think one of the areas that they struggled in was getting production from the 3. You can get 4s out there, and they might think that they have 2 4s already. They might think that, you know what, if we're good enough at the 3, and we have Paxson Wojcik and another guy who maybe is a little longer, so necessary, if you really want to go small, you could slide him down to the 4, right? Imagine Leaky at the 4 with a lot of offensive game. I think Hubert would love something like that.
Yeah.
But you've got Zayden High coming in, and you've got Jalen Washington. So we know the one spot where there's a dearth of talent other than Wojcik is the 3, because everyone's gone. So go get a 3, solidify that area. If you have to roll your dice with High and Washington, that's not bad going into the season, thinking, okay, maybe one of those 2 steps up. We know Jalen can play. He just has to get stronger, tougher. He's got to get more experience playing. And off season, playing full throttle with the former Carolina players is going to do him a world of
difference. Yeah.
Armando will tell you, Tyler sending him to the hospital with bloody noses and mouths and stuff was great for him. Not that Jalen needs to go to the hospital this summer, but he needs that. So you've kind of got parts there. I think the first thing they need is a 3. If we're going to go 1, 2, 3, and I want your 1, 2, 3 as well, we're going to go ahead and add to this podcast and say, begins with a 3. Then I think a backup 5. Then I think a 4. The backup 5, you need right now. They don't have that. You don't want. I can envision a scenario where Jaden or Zayden are both together, gets it done enough at the 4, where you can have Wojcik at 3 and a new 3 sliding down to the 4 at times. You could maybe use that spot to very situationally, depending on who you're going up against. But Armando, I mean, if he goes out, you don't really want Jalen right now, as we saw this year, or Zayden High backing him up there in the post. Hubert has the luxury, if he wants to bring in 6 guys, we think he's going to bring in 4, no more than 4. So we're operating, let's say, the next 3 spots. It's ideal if they get a 3, a 4, and a backup 5. But I think since he has a lot of room, if he can find that guy who's got a couple years left or a year left, just wants to be a part of something special, wants to be a part of that culture and have that experience. And there's not a ton of pressure on him because he goes in at the 14-minute mark, comes out at the 10-minute mark, goes in at the 6-minute mark or 5-minute mark, comes out at the 3-minute mark, or plays the last 2 minutes of the first half. And then the second half spells Armando for like 2 or 3 minutes. He gets 8, 9, 10 minutes a game. And then if Armando tweaks an ankle, Armando gets in foul trouble, he's experienced enough, he's physically strong enough, he can defend the post a little bit, he can get you some rebounds, and he can help. He's a smart guy, maybe help out a little bit defensively, he can slide well down there. That's what you need. And suddenly he can give you 18 or 20 minutes, and then you makeshift it the rest of the way. I think that would be the number 2 thing, because you absolutely have to have that, because Armando's going to get in foul trouble, and the ankle's going to hurt him again.
Injuries will happen.
It does every year.
Mm-hmm.
So then I think if you can get the 4, if you can see a guy out there that's Brady Manic-like and he wants to come, you don't turn it down. Mm-hmm. You take him in a heartbeat. But to me, that's the pecking order. A bouncy, slashy, well-rounded scoring wing, a backup 5, and then a 4. What about you?
I'm going to go 4-3-5, and I think the 4 and the 3 are almost neck and neck. I think you could flip those either way. I think they're almost of equal importance, in my opinion, at least. I think in an ideal world, you need both of those guys. You need both of those guys, whoever they end up bringing in, to be guys that are ready to produce and have a good season next year. I don't necessarily think you can afford to bring a 3 in who maybe doesn't quite hit the ground running like Carolina needs him to. The reason I put the 5 at the last one, AJ, and I do agree with you, I think it's crucial that Carolina brings in a 5. The reason I put that one maybe of less importance is kind of like you said, you need to bring a 5 in, but he's going to be a backup guy. You need a 5 who can come in and maybe play 10, 12 minutes a game. So maybe production-wise, he's not going to give you as much, which is why I'm saying, okay, if you're going to bring just a 5 in to play 10, 12 minutes, I think that's important. But to me, it's not quite as important as bringing in a 3 and a 4 that are ready and that can come in and really contribute and be good players from the get-go. So that's my order for this one. I want to ask you one more question, AJ, before we wrap this one up.
Let me respond very quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I think one of the things that we all made a mistake on Pete Nance is, and I remember talking to Hubert about this in October. Remember when David McCormick, when Armando went out, caught the ball in the paint, turned and scored over Brady? I mean, Brady did so many wonderful things, but he wasn't a 5 defensive.
No, he looked uncomfortable.
And we saw that against David McCormick. David turned and scored twice in the last minute and 32 seconds or whatever it was. And he owned Brady in that sequence. Mm-hmm. So when I talked to Hubert about the things that Pete brings to the table, and I said, well, actually, you now have that guy that could defend David McCormick in that situation. He said, exactly. That's one of the great things about Brady. About Pete. The problem was that was really more who Pete was. I'm not so sure all the 4s in the world can also defend the 5. I think defending the 5 is different. It's very unique. And since he has a lot of scholarships he could offer, he could bring in a lot of guys. I think you need to focus on that being one of your spots, because you could still get everything else and get that. But I wouldn't try to get Armando's backup, the in-case situation guy. I wouldn't try to get that through the other spots. I would try to get that as an isolated player and find the guy who's very comfortable and okay with being in that role. I brought up Justin Knox 1,000 times in the last couple of weeks, and I'll bring him up again. A guy like that. That's what you need. I think it's really important, because that's who he is. You're not going to ask him to go out and play stretch 4. You're not going to ask Zayden High to come in and defend the post when Armando gets hurt at UVA.
You're playing a 5 and a 5.
A minute 18 into the game, and Pete Nance is on the bench. Who's going to be your 5? Well, Jalen went in and did it okay, but that wasn't a banging UVA team. And guess what? That was the night UVA went smaller. Mm-hmm. Because they actually started playing Vanderplas a lot, and that's when he replaced Shedrick in the starting lineup. So UVA changed actually to adapt to Jalen, which I thought was interesting, but that wouldn't have been a long-term thing for Carolina. It wouldn't have worked. So I'm with you. Quite frankly, they've got 5 more spots if they want, they can fill. I think they do 3. So if it's utopia we're talking about, get the 3 I'm talking about, get the 4 you're talking about, and get the 5 we're both talking about. Mm-hmm. And then I think Huber will be in pretty good shape.
Agreed. Guys, let us know if you are a subscriber, would sign up for just $8.33 a month on TarHeelIllustrated.com. We obviously will post this on the message boards. Get involved on there and let us know if you agree with me, agree with AJ, what your opinion is on the order in which Carolina needs to do it. And AJ, I want to ask you one quick question, because
or if you have a different take entirely.
Yeah, if you have a completely different take,
I'd love to know what you guys think.
Yeah, whatever you think, we want to know, and we want to hear your opinion. I want to ask you real quickly. We haven't talked a lot about the 2, but when I look at next year's team, I do see a bit of a hole there that needs to be filled, because I know some people have said, I've seen discussions of maybe they move RJ to the 2 and, maybe Trimble or Wilcher starts at point guard. I think RJ's better at the point guard. I think that's where he can be really good. And I think when you look at a guy that has as much experience as RJ, I think that's the guy you want out there running your offense. And I do think he's better as a point guard necessarily than he would be off the ball as a 2. That's just my opinion. So when you look at the 2 position, AJ, especially with Caleb leaving, there's a hole there, because when I look at this current roster, I mean, you got DeMarco Dunn, but has he really proved that he can be a consistent 2 yet, that can score and put the ball in the basket? Not quite yet. Maybe with more opportunities and another offseason, he can kind of grow into that guy. And then you look at who's coming in Wilcher, he's not a scoring 2, and Zayden High is obviously not a 2. And even Wojcik, I think, can play that position, but as you talked, I think he's going to play a little bit of 2, play a little bit of 3. And even looking at his stat line at Brown, I don't necessarily think he's a guy you can just pencil in to come in, be a 2 for the Tar Heels and consistently put the ball in the basket. I think that's up for debate, just like any transfer coming into the Tar Heels will be. So how important is that 2 position? And do you think Carolina will go after somebody else at that position? Because to me, I think they need somebody there.
Well, right now in the backcourt, if you want to call Wojcik a 2, let's say that they've got Wilcher, Davis, Wojcik, Trimble, and Dunn. They've already got 5 guys.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they have their backcourt.
Mm-hmm.
So if you talk to people who have seen Wilcher play a lot, they'll tell you that he needs the ball in his hands, and he's a guy who gets to the rim in any situation. So maybe more adept at getting the rim than RJ. RJ's got that pull-up game. He could drag the defender down there, and he's really good at stopping. And as the defender still drags, and he hits that little pull-up shot.
He's got a nice little mid-range game.
But RJ's a terrific shooter, and imagine him coming off screens and being a shooter. Now, I know that RJ wants to play point guard, and he thinks, okay, my only chance of making the NBA is playing point guard, but he also needs to produce in college.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he is now. And if he's a scorer and he's already has 2 years of experience playing point guard in college, I don't know how much better he's going to get at point guard, but right now he needs to show the league he could do a lot of things. And really, when you get to the league, when you get to Vegas, if you could play, you could play. Then you get an invite to camp. Exactly. So I don't think what he does next year in Chapel Hill is going to affect that so much. He needs to win games. And if he wins games, he's going to make more money because NIL opportunities are going to go up. I think RJ at the 2 with Wilcher at the 1, if Wilcher is comfortable enough and mature enough, which I think everything I'm hearing is that's the case. And David has spoken to him a bunch of times, and David would be better to speak to about this, but I fully take everything David says with 100% stock, that he thinks he could step in and play right away and help out and be that point guard. I mean, he's maybe not a great shooter. Like RJ has a potential to be a great shooter, so let him be that great shooter. Let him be that 2 that could drive from the perimeter, maybe even from the wing at times. I think he's got that in his game. I also think that you brought up Dunn, and I agree with you. Dunn hasn't yet looked like a North Carolina 2. However, it depends on who you stick at that 3.
Mm-hmm. It's a good point.
If you've got a combination, or obviously it's not fair, they're not going to find this, but if they have a scaled down version, a combination of Cam Johnson and Justin Jackson and Harrison Barnes, the 3, let's say, someone who has a lot of those skill sets, maybe you could afford to have Wojcik play 25 minutes at the 2. If you're super bouncy at the 4, same thing. I think what they need is athletic ability. One of the things I'm watching this tournament, which has been obvious, is that Carolina wasn't very athletic last year. Not only were they just not naturally athletic, but they didn't play an athletic style of game. Mm-hmm. They were too plodding. They were too directional. Everything was too choreographed as each moment came along instead of reactionary.
Yeah.
And Carolina basketball in the past has been reactionary because Roy would teach his team how to play the game and expect them to do it in the games. I think one of the things that Hubert did so much of, constantly calling stuff and reshifting and readjust, and they get in secondary transition, nothing's there. Armando beats his guy down the court. He's on the lower block. He doesn't get the ball. He has to re-gauge, go back up, set a screen, and then roll. Next thing you know, there's 12 seconds on the shot clock.
Yeah.
That's the problem they came into. And I think part of it was they weren't super athletic. So they didn't play athletically and they weren't athletic. Mm-hmm. You need to be bouncier. And if you're super bouncy at the 3 and the 4, you can afford maybe to have Wojcik be your 2-man. Mm-hmm. So I think that they're going to stay pretty much where they are. Depends on what they can get. Timberlake, I think they would take a Timberlake because he could score. And again, I think you can play a little bit small out on the perimeter because you've got a beast inside in Armando. And there are interesting options at the 4 spot. And I think Hubert envisions something like that. And let's also remember, he's building a team right now. He's not really building a program with this group. Mm-hmm. He's building next year's team. And then after then, you figure out the next year and you move on. So Yeah, I could see. I think that they would take one of these two guys, but I don't think that they have to. I think they have what they have, and I think if you're going to lean on Wilcher at the 1 and RJ at the 2, or vice versa, there's a lot of clubs in college basketball that would take that right now and would ignore everybody else in the portal and say that's our backcourt.
Yeah,
because I think it's a pretty good backcourt.
Yeah, just to stay on that for a second, and like I said, we're going to wrap this up quickly, but I wanted to stay on it just for a second because. Do you think it's risky doing that? Because I think if I'm looking at it like this, you're taking a guy like RJ off the ball who's pretty much played on the ball his whole time at Carolina, and you're saying, hey, I want you to go kind of play a new position at the 2. And again, I think he can do it, but it is a bit of a position change because you're kind of taking the ball out of his hands and forcing him to kind of create his own shots through screens or whatever it may be. And then you're saying, okay, I'm going to bring in a freshman point guard who theoretically seems like he can come in and do it, but we've seen in the past, AJ, and I know it's Hubert Davis, so it's different, but historically it takes Carolina point guards a year at least to really understand the system and come in and be prolific at that system. That's just when I look at history of North Carolina point guards, that's kind of the theme. And then you could say, well, maybe Trimble comes in, but he's a guy who offensive game needs to improve. And, maybe could play that 1, but again, kind of like Wilcher, you could have him at the point guard, but neither of them guys are really threats scoring the ball. So you kind of, again, you're going to consider those guys facilitators more than scoring point guard. I think Wilcher can be that guy, but again, to my knowledge, he's more the guy that wants to get to the rack instead of shoot, from the outside. So do you think there's a risk in doing that, moving RJ to the 2 and kind of relying on an inexperienced point guard in the Carolina system?
RJ largely played the 2 his freshman year.
Yeah.
Caleb was more the 1.
But the team seemed better when he was.
And then last year, RJ and Caleb were kind of going back and forth at the 1 and 2 until Hubert sort of put the ball in RJ's hands in January.
It seemed like the team was better when RJ had the ball.
Oh, they were, because they weren't very good at all when the ball was in, because Caleb's not a point guard.
He's not a point guard now.
And Roy tried to make it happen. It didn't happen. Hubert tried to make it happen. It didn't work. So I don't think RJ's a great distributor. I don't think he's a great game manager.
No, I see your point in that, yeah.
I think he's an okay point guard, and if he had better shooting around him, it'd be easier, and his assist numbers would be up because you get those. I used to call him the Greg Paulus assists. When I covered Duke, Paulus would just swing the ball to JJ. He hit a 26-footer. Paulus would get an assist. Yeah. All he did was swing the ball.
I could have done that. Yeah.
If they had more perimeter shooting, RJ would have some more of those kinds of assists, but I think you need to score. And RJ's a scorer, and so much of his time last year was spent on getting the set play going and trying to use the ball screen. And sometimes you use it, sometimes you don't. And also trying to see the floor. And there wasn't much movement, and he took a lot of bad shots as a result because he was forced into it by the stagnant offense. I think if you've got a dude with his experience that has played a lot of the 2, and that can put the ball in the hole. And if Wilcher's competent enough at the 1, I think that it's okay to do that. And there have been a lot of freshman point guards have been really good just in recent history. Raymond Felton was really good his first year as a freshman. Kendall Marshall took over midway through his freshman year, and that's what sent Larry Drew packing. Kobe White did pretty well. I'll never forget. I've told this story before, and I'll very quickly tell it again. It was Kobe versus Seventh Woods. And
he Roy wanted to make
Roy wanted 7th to have every opportunity, but he wanted to push Kobe to win that job. And when they lost to Kentucky and Chicago in the CBS Sports Classic, but I remember being in the locker room after that game talking to Kobe, and he was talking about what the other guys should have been doing, where they should have been, and where they struggled that night offensively, not just because of him, but because the offense had Joe. And I knew that night he got it. It clicked, and he was the point guard from that point on. And he was sensational from that point on. He was damn good. So freshmen can be really good point guards, especially in this era. I don't think it's as big a deal. It's just up to the guy. How mature is he? What kind of game does he have? And everybody that's seen Simeon Wilcher, we have a guy on our board, Datica, who's seen him play in person a lot, says he can get to the rim. Yeah. So if you've got a 2 that could shoot, and you know RJ could shoot, we don't know Wilcher could shoot in college yet. And you've got a 1 who can get to the rim. And then you stick a 3 that can do that stuff, and a 4 that at least isn't Pete Nance playing in sand at the top of the key or at the free throw line, but he's actually playing out there. Man, you've got a lot of scoring options out there, and you stress the crap out of defenses because they have to guard 1 through 5. And look at the Final Four right now. You got to guard 1 through 5 on 3 of the teams. San Diego State's a little bit more defense oriented, but they still have guys that you got to guard. They still have guys that can put the ball in the basket in all 5 spots, especially Miami, Florida Atlantic, and UConn. You've got to guard 1 through 5 with those teams. And I think that's what Hubert envisions, is having a group on the floor in which you've got to guard 1 through 5. Last year, it was 3 of 5, or 2 of 5. There were some bizarre player groupings out there where it was 2 of 5, and one of them was the guy with the ball in his hands. So if you put the ball in Trimble's hands, and he's not going to be guarded as a 2, but if you put him out there as a 1 and put the ball in his hands, you have to guard the ball first and foremost. So then you have to guard another dude. So suddenly you have to guard 3 people out there instead of just 2, right? So that's another reason why I think Wilcher at the 1 ultimately makes a lot of sense, because you have to guard him. You have to guard RJ at the 2. You have to guard Armando. So you got to find 2 of the guys to stick on the floor that teams must guard as well.
Fascinating topic, fascinating offseason ahead. So many different, you can see it in so many different ways. And I think a lot of people out there are going to have differing opinions, not only from you or me, but from both of us in terms of what the importance is and how Carolina can kind of line up and be at its best next season. Because you can see each argument, and each argument kind of has a little bit of credence to it. You're like, yeah, I kind of see that, but, and I kind of see that, but. So it's a really interesting topic.
It's because they have a crap load of needs.
Yeah, there's so many, there's so many things that need to be fixed and so many things that need to be
Remember
added.
what I said the other day? I was joking, and I'll repeat, and I hate that I'm like the 6-year-old who tells a funny joke and then tells it 600 times again. But it's like the Bates Motel. That blinking sign outside the Bates Motel is blinking outside the Dean Dome right now. They have a lot of vacancies.
Vacancy, man.
So they need people to fill. They need dudes to fill those vacancies right now. So that's what makes it exciting. And it's a risk. You mentioned something about it being risky earlier. I think everything's a risk right now because you don't really know what you're.
You don't know how people are even. Yeah, you don't know how people are going to bet in. You might bring a guy who's played 4 years of college, but again, it's North Carolina. It's a different system. It's a different program, but different expectations. Everything's a risk.
I remember I talked to Christian Keeling's dad. I think it's been far enough removed from this. I could probably say this publicly. I talked to Christian Keeling's dad in the hotel in Spokane, Washington, when they were there to play Gonzaga. He stayed in my hotel, and we were talking about Christian's struggles. This is, a week before Christmas, maybe, around that time.
Yes, 2019.
It was, because it was a couple days before they played UCLA in Vegas. They played Jaime Jaquez and Tiger Campbell in Vegas, by the way.
Great names.
Those guys have been in college. So I was talking to his dad in the hotel in Spokane, and he was talking about the stress, the pressure for Christian of playing at North Carolina, and how it was very difficult for him. And by the time he relaxed was mid-February. He started hitting shots, and it was too late, basically. So
it's different, man.
Yeah. You made the point a few days ago in a pod, and I think it's a really good one, and I agree with it. And really depends on, it's a case-by-case situation. Some guys aren't going to feel the pressure. Some are going to feel the pressure. And that's part of the vetting process. So Hubert's called this speed dating, but one of the good things about them not rushing into filling the roster right now is to vet guys a little bit more.
Yeah. Personality is huge.
A little bit more. Yeah. So there's going to be Christian Keelings out there. And again, Christian was a really nice player, a wonderful shooter. He just played with so much stress. There was nothing fluid about him until I remember the Syracuse game, seeing him hit shots and just seeing him smile on the court. It's like, this dude finally felt normal. Yeah. And Syracuse game was the end of February. So, and then the season ended a week later because of COVID, and they got eliminated in the ACC tournament. So you want to avoid that, but it's also a risk. You might bring in 4 guys and 2 of them are like that. That means the other 2 better be really good. Yeah. The other 2 better be really good.
Yeah. There's no doubt about it, man. Again, really fascinating offseason ahead, and it's going to be a fascinating one to cover. So make sure you keep it locked to TarIllustrated.com. And real quickly, a shout out to our sponsor on this podcast one more time, MyPerfectFranchise.net. Guys, look, if you don't like your job, you want to switch it up, you want to have your own career, you want to take control of your own career path, do your own thing, be your own boss, have unlimited PTO, talk to Andy Ludicky, man. He's got you covered. Again, he's great. He's a franchise veteran, a franchise owner, and he's a guy who went from being in the corporate world, opening his own franchise, and now he's helping other people open his own franchise. So he is a prime example, AJ, that if he can do it, you can do it too. And if you talk to him and sit down with him, you'll see he's just a normal guy. Just
it's free. You. Consultation's free.
100% free, man.
He doesn't make money unless you get a business. So,
and the consultation process is very thorough. It's very vetted. And again, he doesn't make any money until you make money. So I think that's great. And he'll be along with you every step of the way. So check him out, myperfectfranchise.net. Big shout out to Andy, massive Mac Brown fan as well. Have to add that. So if you do talk end up talking to him, make sure you talk a little Mac with him, because I know he'll love that conversation. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Another episode of the THI podcast. Again, head on over to our boards, $8.33 a month to get subscribed and be a premium member, become a Carolina Insider too. Get in there, offer your opinions. We want to hear from you and what you guys think. So go head on over there. TarIllustrated.com. Link to that is below. Again, I'm Jacob Turner. He's Andrew Jones. We appreciate y'all watching. See you in the next one. Thanks.